Hello, Math Essentials students. Today we are going to quickly talk about some properties with triangles. You have already discussed these properties with Mrs. Parsons. And so we're going to review them because it may have been a while since we've talked about this. The first property or theorem that we're going to look at is called the triangle sum theorem. And we've been practicing this all the way back since 7th grade, maybe even earlier, okay? And so you folks already know that the three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, okay? And so right now I want you to kind of jump down the notes a little bit, skipping that first table, and take a look at the bottom of the first page here. And it says finding angles in acute, right, or obtuse triangles, okay? So in our first example, we know the three angles add up to 180 degrees. There's two ways you can approach this. I can take the 180 and I can subtract the 42 and then subtract the 63, and that leftover amount is x. A lot of you prefer, though, to add first. So what we could do is take our 42, we can add our 63, and so that would give me 105 degrees. Okay, and then taking the 180 that the angles in a triangle add up to and subtracting that 105, we're left with the measure of angle x. And so we know that it's 75 degrees, okay? We can do the same thing over here. Now, if you remember back to one of our earlier videos, what this little box means, it's 90 degrees, okay? So if this is a 90-degree angle, that means that these two angles must also add up to 90. And I say that because 90 plus 90 is our 180. So if you recognize that, it might be a little faster for you if you just do 90, take away 37, and you would end up getting the 53 degrees for y. Okay, so this is something that we've practiced for a while now, and just know that that is also going to be on the test that you have coming up in a week or so. Now, the other piece that we're going to talk about today is naming triangles properly, okay? There's two ways that we can name triangles. The first is by their angles. So we're going to go back to the top of, or the middle of our first notes page, and we're going to classify or name these triangles by their angles, okay? There's three different ways that you can name a triangle. It could be acute, right, or obtuse. And so if you have these notes, let's fill these in, okay? An acute triangle has three acute angles, okay? A right triangle has one right angle, and an obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle. Now, let's just talk quickly about why the right and obtuse triangles only have one of those types of angles. So remember, the three angles add up to 180. If we're talking about a right triangle, if 90 degrees of the 180 is taken up by that one right angle, that means that there's 90 degrees left among the two other angles. So those two other angles have to be acute. There's no way they could be right or obtuse. And so the same thing happens with our obtuse triangle. There just aren't enough degrees inside the triangle to have two obtuse angles, okay? You guys can quickly sketch an example of what these triangles look like, okay? Oh, that was kind of terrible. But here I have a triangle. All three angles are clearly acute, okay? A right triangle. A lot of you think about like a ladder leaning up against a house. And then we can put the little box or square in that says that's a right angle. And then an obtuse angle, those are the hardest to draw, but if you think about like the ground, and then a tree was leaning, it was growing crooked, and we have our third side, okay? So that's how we name triangles based off of their angles. You guys are typically pretty good with that. I'm gonna clear this out, and we're gonna scroll down our page, going on to the second page, and we're gonna talk about naming triangles by their sides. Now, what's interesting is when you name a triangle by its side, we also can tell a little bit about its angles, okay? So let's talk about equilateral. An equilateral, oops, I'm on the wrong thing right now. Let's just clear that out. An equilateral triangle has three congruent sides. But what's interesting is that if all three sides are congruent, it also has three congruent angles, okay? Now these are like what you guys call your perfect triangles. Mine does not look so perfect though, okay? So we use these tick marks to indicate that these sides are congruent, okay? And anytime you have sides that are congruent, the angles that are opposite those sides are also congruent. Isosceles is a little bit different, okay? An isosceles triangle has at least two congruent sides, and what you'll see is that the angles opposite those sides are also congruent, okay? And then this is what it might look like. It's very symmetrical, okay? The left and the right side are congruent, which means this bottom left and this bottom right angle are also congruent, okay? A scalene triangle, those are just a little bit different altogether, okay? They have no congruent sides or angles. Everything is different about them. So maybe it looks something like this, okay? There is nothing congruent about it though. So when you go and name your triangles, we want to give a name that's both something about the angles and something about the sides. So we could use this one as an example maybe. This kind of looks like it's a 90-degree angle. So I know it could be a right triangle. Since all three sides are different though, I would call it a right scalene triangle. Okay, saying right about the angles and scalene about the sides, right scalene triangle. If we take this middle one, for example, all three angles appear to be acute, but I know it's isosceles because these two sides are congruent, so we would call it an acute isosceles triangle. Okay, and you'll get some practice with that with the riddle worksheet I've included for you. Let's go down a little bit further and take a look at one other example, okay? These ones are a little bit tricky. You'll see some of this on your practice worksheet as well, but we basically want to write an equation and then solve the equation to find the missing angles, okay? When we look at this first example, it's equilateral. It has three angles that are all the same measure. Well, we know that those three angles also add up to 180 degrees. So m plus m plus m gives us 3m. And 3m has to be equal to 180 degrees. So now that I've written an equation, you can go ahead and solve your equation like you've been doing since 6th grade. And you can see that the measure of angle m, which is all of these angles, each one, is 60 degrees. Okay? Now over here on this side, it's a little bit different. Okay, all of those angles still add up to 180 degrees. So we're thinking 2p plus 3p plus 4p, okay? That's gonna leave us with 9p is equal to 180 degrees. When we solve for p by dividing by 9, we end up getting 20. But that's not our question here. It's not what was p. Our question said to find the unknown angles, okay? So if this angle is 2p, that means it's really 40 degrees. If this angle is 3p, 3 times 20, it's really 60 degrees. And that means this one here, 4p, is 4 times 20, and so it's 80 degrees. And the way you can check this is to now add up these three angles and make sure you get 180. I know 80 plus 40 is 120, and 120 plus 60 is 180. So we must have done it right, okay? Now this last part, well, this is just a word problem, and I'm noticing that I have a typo here. Sorry about that. This should say second. Okay, so it says the second angle in a triangle is twice as large as the first. The third angle is half as large as the second, okay? So let's just draw a quick triangle and get a visual. Our first, our second, and our third angles, okay? The second angle is twice as large as the first. So if the first is x degrees and the second is twice as large, that means that it's 2x. Okay? And now the third angle is half as large as the second. Well, half of 2x is just x again. And so this one is really a lot like our second example that we looked at up here. It was just written out in words, okay? When I look inside these angles here, I have x, x, and 2x. So that's really 4x is equal to 180 degrees. And when we divide by 4, we end up getting x is equal to 45. Okay? So when it says find the angle measures, well, since two of these angles were x, okay, that means that we have a 45-degree angle, a 45-degree angle, which leaves 90 degrees left over because 45 plus 45 is 90 and plus 90 is 180. I can check that over here. 2 times 45 is also 90. And so these are our 3 angle measures, okay? So right now what you folks are going to do is take these notes, make sure they're all complete. You've paused the video and filled them in, and then attached to this note sheet in the folder you picked up from school is a riddle worksheet. I'd like you to go ahead and complete that riddle worksheet and then submit it to Google Classroom. If you have any specific questions, feel free to comment or you may email me individually. All right? You folks have a great day.